Hey guys, how's it going? It's Baggins here, and today I wanted to provide you guys with an updated guide for healing in Season 1 of New World. Season 1 has been into the game for about, it's probably about 3 weeks now when this video comes out. It arrived on April 4th, but I wanted to take a little bit of time to sort of play through the game and make sure the changes were affecting healing as I thought they were. And that they haven't really changed that much, but there is still a few things that you might want to tweak here and there. Now, as always, what we do with these guide videos, you'll be able to scrub along and find different sections. So if you're interested in one particular thing, like gems or weapons, ability rotation, stats, weapon mastery, you'll be able to see that all down below in the description, and also if you scrub along in the video. Now, before we go any further with this one, a quick word from today's sponsor. Streamlabs Ultra is an amazing suite of tools which you can use to upgrade your stream's power level. One of my favorite features is their themes overlay library. They have themes for a variety of different games, from Valorant to League of Legends, Minecraft, Overwatch, and so many more. Both free and premium overlay themes are available, but with Streamlabs Ultra, you unlock premium overlays and assets made by professional designers. Within these themes, they often have stream starting screens, stream ending screens, alerts, transitions, you name it, the full package to upgrade your stream's visual presentation, which just often, leads your viewers to believe that you've put a little bit more care and have a little bit more dedication to your craft. One of my favorite theme overlays is actually this lo-fi just chatting screen. I really like the art style in the starting and ending screens. The alerts look pretty cool. And this is one that you can get for free with access to Streamlabs Ultra. So if you guys are interested, make sure you check out my link in the description down below. You can get 50% off your first month. Thank you very much to Streamlabs for sponsoring this video. Now, before we do properly kick off this guide, I want to let you know that this is a guide for PvE healing as opposed to PvP. If you guys are interested in builds and guides for healing in 3v3 Arena, Outpost Rush, Wars, other PvP content, let me know in the comments down below. We can potentially make a separate guide on that, but I did want to make something focused just on PvE, and in particular healing expeditions and mutated expeditions. So with that said, what are going to be our weapons of choice when it comes to healing? It probably comes as no surprise. It is the Life Staff and the Void Gauntlet. These are currently the only weapons which scale off of focus, and focus is the stat that sort of increases your healing. Without any points into focus, you don't really do any healing, so both of these can get damage and healing numbers with focus. You might see some other healers out there running a Life Staff and Ice Gauntlet or a few other weapons like that, but for the sake of making things concise and being clear in here and having this video not be hours long, we are just going to focus on these two weapons, the Life Staff and the Void Gauntlet. One of the basic when it comes to healing is your equip load. You will need to be in a light equip load. This means primarily wearing light armor, but you can get away with a medium chest. Also, what works is a medium pair of legs, and then you can do medium boots or medium gloves or medium helmet, but I just recommend going with the medium chest and then everything else light, and that is so that you can maximize the amount of armor your character has without going into the medium threshold. The reason why we want to be in light is because it gives us a significant healing bonus. We get a 30% outgoing healing bonus, and we also get access to the dodge roll, which is a very useful tool for escape and staying out of danger. Now, moving on to the stats or attributes for a PvE healer, you are going to be putting points into focus and constitution. As a beginner, I would recommend that you go up to 200 constitution. This keeps you nice and safe because we get the 200 constitution perk here, increases your physical and elemental armor by 10%, just makes you a little bit tankier. If you do make any mistakes or if the tank loses aggro, you're not going to die as fast, and then your remaining points are going to go into focus, just as many as you can get. I have 625 gear score armor right now, so the difference between being 600 gear score and 625 is you get 1 extra point on all of your gear, and there are 10 different gear slots, so that's how I've got this 10 extra points that you guys may have seen there. One other thing I'm also doing to get a few extra stats is I'm using a food buff. So there are a variety of different attribute buffs that you can get in the game. Some of the most common ones are the ones that I recommend is the smoked rib cap with cabbage and barley soup, and then there's also it's a bear flank something. We'll potentially be able to pop it up on the screen here, but they basically are two variants. One increases constitution by 24, focus by 16, and then the other one is the other way around. So it's focus by 24 and constitution by 16. These are the ones that I recommend you buy off the trading post. They're fairly cheap, and they just give you 40 stats in total into the points that you are interested in, being, again, constitution and focus. So these are the stats for a beginner healer. Now, as we get more advanced as a healer, as we get more comfortable with healing, we are going to start taking points out of constitution and a few out of focus here as well, and start putting them into intelligence. Now, the reason why we're going to do this is because we're going to start looking to do damage along with healing at the same time. So for those of you who are brand new to healing, again, 300, 200 would be what I would recommend. I actually just take my camera off here because you can't fully see everything. But yeah, 300, 200, this is going to be your baseline, and this will is what I would recommend for beginner healers. But as you get more advanced and as you get more comfortable with healing, we can start dropping down. Currently, right now, I am trying to hover around the 140 constitution point, and we're starting to put some points into intelligence. Sometimes if we're feeling extra spicy, we might even drop some points out of focus as well, go up to 100 intelligence. And effectively, the more comfortable you feel with healing, the more points you can go into intelligence. Now, currently, I wouldn't recommend going past 150 intelligence. Some people do like to go to 200, but I think 150 is good enough now because you have to start sacrificing a lot of points out of constitution and focus. Personally, the minimum that I would go for is 250 focus and 100 constitution. I wouldn't drop below 100, and I wouldn't drop below 250. These benefits that you get here are too nice to give up, in my opinion. Whilst it will allow you to get some more points into intelligence to do some more damage, ultimately you are a healer, and you know, healing is what the emphasis is on for this guide. So again, quick recap here: 300, 200 is going to be our baseline, and then if you consider yourself a more advanced healer, and we'll talk about the builds, the weapon mastery, and why this is as we get further into this video, you want to be taking some points out of constitution, maybe a few points out of focus, and then start putting them into intelligence to try and do some damage. Hovering probably between the 50 to 100 point area is what I would recommend for a sort of intermediate healer. Now, moving on to weapon mastery, we will go over sort of 3 different builds that you can run, and again, this is going to be linked to the amount of attributes that you want to run. So for the 300 200 build, where we just go primarily into focus and then remaining points into constitution to stay nice and safe, I would recommend that you guys go with Divine Embrace, Sacred Ground here. We're going to fully max out all of them, and then we're going to jump over to the right side of the tree and pick up Beacon. And we're not going to bother fully maxing this out because this is only for movement speed, which doesn't really matter that much from just a raw healing standpoint. Now, some other passives that are very important for us to pick up include Blissful Touch. This is huge because it allows us to do a lot of extra healing just by left clicking through our team. We're also going to get Desperate Speed for some cooldown reduction, Revitalize for some more cooldown reduction, Intensify for some more outgoing healing, Sacred Protection for some more healing, Divine Blessing, again for more healing, Protector's Strength, again even more healing, and then personally, I like to take Protector's Touch over here. Even though Fortify was nerfed fairly significantly, it still does give you a little bit extra armor and just keeps you a little bit safer, especially when you are getting the 200 constitution bonus that is increasing your armor by 10%. You know, you can have this stack on top of that. It just keeps you alive, in my opinion. And there's nothing else that is particularly so important that we grab over here that I would, you know, say that you get it over Protector's Touch. So this is what we're looking at for a 300 focus, 200 constitution build. Now, moving over to the Void Gauntlet with the 300 focus, 200 constitution, we are going to be picking up Oblivion, but not getting the final upgrade because they really nerfed this into the ground. It's pretty terrible. We're going to pick up Orb of Decay because it provides some bonus healing to our team and also applies Rend, so the enemy take more damage. And then we're going to pick up Essence Rupture because it's another amazing healing tool as well. Now, in my opinion, I still like to go for the Void Caller passive. It is quite difficult to do. You basically have to take every other passive over here in order to get it. But it is pretty juicy. If you can pop Orb of Decay into a big pack of enemies, you can activate the Void Caller passive. It's not going to happen very often, but when it does, you just get this little healing aura around you, and then you can run into your team and yeah, proc some heals on them. And then we have 1 point left over here, and I'm going to pick up Mending Evasion because it's a pretty decent heal, 80% weapon damage heal when you're full mana, and it pops every 20 seconds, so that can just sort of keep you topped up in between fights. However, you might also look to take Cleansing Harvest for some debuff removal, or you could also go Radiant Efficiency to reduce your mana costs. I think that's also a good option as well, but this is what I would recommend for 300 focus, 200 constitution as a beginner healer build. The concept behind these 2 builds is you are basically switching to the Void Gauntlet, you drop down your Oblivion, you fire out Orb, you put Essence Rupture on an enemy, and then you switch over to your Life Staff and you start using the abilities over here as well. So your Sacred Ground, your Beacon, you want to get those out first, and then you're using Divine Embrace whenever you see anybody drop low on your team. You will need to use targeted healing for Sacred Ground and Divine Embrace. We'll talk a bit later on about the keybinds for that one. Now, if we're feeling a bit more advanced and we want to start introducing some points into intelligence, what that means is we are going to start using different builds here. So this is one build that I would recommend for at least 50 points into intelligence, and as a result, you're going to be taking a few points out of constitution and maybe some out of focus to achieve that. Now, the reason why we're going to do this is because our Void Gauntlet skill tree is also going to change as well. So let's hop over to the Void Gauntlet skill tree, and then we can explain, you know, why this has changed, why we've dropped Divine Embrace. So with the Void Gauntlet, we are now going to be picking up Void Blade in place of Essence Rupture. So we can go like this, effectively take a similar path that we took last time. We are going to pick up that Void Caller passive because it's just juicy extra healing, and I do have a what is it, like a preference towards picking Mending Evasion, so I usually pick that up over on the right side here. But this is going to help explain why we have decided to drop Divine Embrace. Now, with this build, typically, so let's imagine this pack of trees here is our teammate. They're raring to go to get into the action. In fact, they are literally like in combat right now. So what we would do is open up with the Sacred Ground, straight into Orb, and then into Beacon, and then we're going to switch over, drop Oblivion, pull out the Void Blade, and then also fire in the Orb of Decay. And then we're just going to be here left-clicking until our heals look like they come off of cooldown on the Life Staff. So once the Sacred Ground is about to deplete, we got 4 seconds left. We switch over, get a little bit of cooldown reduction here, and then we go straight back in with a Sacred Ground, with another Orb, and then we're switching over to the Void Gauntlet, and we'll rinse and repeat. Now, we will probably have a little bit more cooldown reduction here, because we'll actually have enemies to hit, as, you know, we don't right now, so waiting awkwardly for the Void Blade to come off of cooldown. But the reason, as you can see there, we don't really have time to weave in the Divine Embrace. Like, we just want to sort of drop our heals on the ground, and then switch over and get into the action. And again, this is for more comfortable, more competent healers. If you are looking to contribute a little bit of DPS as well, this is a build that I would recommend, and it does work very well if you are playing with a bunch of melee players. So if a lot of people on your team have a great axe or a great sword or a hatchet or a spear, you know, not that many fire staffs or bows, but everybody's playing melee weapons, then this build can work really well, because they're all going to be stacked up together on top of the enemies, so you can just drop heals on top of them and then go in with the Void Blade. Make sure you've got Oblivion and Orb of Decay running off of like on cooldown as well. And again, to further reiterate what was going on there, with this build, you're typically looking to take a little bit less Constitution, which is kind of risky because you are going to be in with the Void Blade, but you're going to put some points into Intelligence, which is going to help your Void Gauntlet do damage, because the Void Gauntlet scales off of Intelligence and Focus, and Intelligence allows it to do some extra damage. So, you know, we could go all the way up to 100 Intelligence here and get the damage with light and heavy attacks. A little bit of Focus still there, though, to make sure we do some good healing, and some Constitution so we don't die. And this is sort of your medium to advanced healer build, where you are using a Void Blade, and you're less focused on just like permanently healing your team and more on like contributing damage as well. Now, one of the variation of this build you can do is it's stripping away Orb of Decay and using Petrifying Scream instead. Petrifying Scream has a pretty nice Fortify in it, which is nowhere near as good as it used to be, because again, we have seen Fortify nerfs in Season 1. However, with the perk Putrefying Scream, which we'll talk about later on, this can be very handy for particular expeditions like Empyrean Forge, and also certain mutations where the enemies do a lot of healing. For example, right now, in the depths, we have the enemies applying a lot of healing to themselves with that compost effect on the top line there. Enemies leave a zone upon death, healing enemies that stand in it for 3% health per second. So if we use a Void Gauntlet with Putrefying Scream, which again, we're going to go more into later on, then we can reduce the enemy's healing by a pretty significant margin. So you can just make a slight twist here to take away Orb of Decay and put Scream on instead. But otherwise, the build is pretty much the same. One other thing that I've been doing with the Life Staff recently is getting rid of Orb of Protection altogether, and instead I like to go for the Beacon over here, the Sacred Ground, and then I've been running the Spicy Splash of Light. Now, this is just a build that I find is, if I want to turn my brain off, if I want to just be able to like heal and not really think about it too much, we run this build instead. Orb has been seeing some nerfs because, again, of the Fortify changes, where Fortify now increases armor rather than just giving you a straight up damage reduction. The armor increase isn't very useful if you have a lot of people in light armor, which typically the expeditions that I heal, everybody's in light armor other than the tanks. So yeah, Fortify is just not doing too much. So as a result, I've been experimenting with Splash of Light, and I found it pretty fun as well. I'm not sure if I would recommend this build, but if it is something that you want to give a go, and if you're finding like Orb a little bit too tricky to weave into the rotation, Splash can be pretty good. And one of the benefits of Splash is it's got a 100-meter range. So even if, you know, your team is like all the way over there behind a wall or something, like 100 meters is really, really far. Like 120 over there. So probably like up at the edge of this bridge, we could still be able to heal our team with Splash of Light, which is, yeah, that's pretty insane. That's pretty far away that we can still get that heal off, even if they're like behind a wall or something. Right, so we have covered attributes, and we've also covered weapon mastery. Next, let's talk about perks. In particular, we are going to start with ability perks, because there are quite a few that you want to pick up in order to sort of make your healing as powerful as possible. So the first perk that we're going to talk about is Fortifying Sacred Ground. So again, actually, I'm just going to take my camera off because it's just covering stuff on the left-hand side of the screen here. So Fortifying Sacred Ground gives Fortify, which increases armor by nearly 10% for 5 seconds. Now, this perk has been nerfed pretty badly. Again, we mentioned with this with the Orb of Protection, where Fortify is nowhere good as it used to be, but in my opinion, it's still worth it. It's still, you are going to be using Sacred Ground in pretty much every healing build ever, and when it comes to PvE, it's still just some extra damage reduction. So for me, it's a no-brainer to pick this one up. Make sure you have this on a piece of gear, but probably just go for it on your armor armor rather than getting it on your life staff. Refreshing Divine Embrace is another perk to talk about. I think if you are going to be using Divine Embrace in your build, especially if you're using the 300 focus, 200 constitution beginner healing build, I strongly recommend that you go for this on your life staff. We'll talk about various pieces of gear that you can acquire with this on later on in the guide and where you can get them from. But yeah, Refreshing Divine Embrace reduces the cooldown of the ability by 69% when you heal somebody under 50%. It's a really short cooldown, often less than 1 second when you pop Divine Embrace, so you can just keep popping it back to back. If your tank is getting low, top them up, then they get low, then you top them up. It's just really, really good for pure healing. The next perk to talk about is Mending Protection. Now, if we're moving back over to the build that we spoke of, where you run Sacred Ground, Beacon, and Orb of Protection, I would choose to take Mending Protection here. It gives you a huge outgoing healing boost if you heal somebody under 50%. So if you heal somebody with Orb and they're under 50%, for the next 3 seconds, your heals are 42% stronger, which is pretty damn good. So if you are using Orb of Protection in your build, I would recommend going for Mending Protection, most likely on the life staff, but at the very least, put it onto the armor, like find an armor perk slot for it and put it on there. The next perk that I recommend is Keen Beacon. As you've seen in most of the builds that I recommend, Beacon is also there as well. Whilst this doesn't increase our healing capability, it does allow our team to do a little bit of extra damage. It gives them a 6%, well, 6.1% crit chance increase. I don't think this is significant enough that you need to bother getting it on the life staff, but I do think it's just a freebie that makes your beacon a little bit better when it heals your team. So Keen Beacon, another perk that I recommend. Now we're going to move over to the Void Gauntlet perks that I recommend you go for. The first one is Refreshing Rupture. If you are playing with the beginner healer build of 300 focus, 200 constitution, and you're using Rupture in your build, I strongly recommend you get Refreshing Rupture. It just reduces the cooldown by half when you land Rupture on enemy. When you hit a target with Essence Rupture, reduce Essence Rupture's cooldown by 50%. Pretty good. So you can put Essence Rupture on multiple different targets at the same time, and that is just a lot of extra healing for your team. So yeah, if you're focusing on a pure healing build, Refreshing Rupture is going to be the way to go. The next Void Gauntlet perk to look out for, and we talked about this a little bit when we covered the weapon mastery, is Putrefying Scream. If you are going to be running Scream, then you may as well run Putrefying Scream as well. When you land Scream on an enemy, it applies Disease, which reduces their incoming healing by 40% for 8 seconds. This is huge to have in Nature Mutations and also in the Empyrean Forge, where the enemies do a lot of healing because they also have life staffs. So yeah, Putrefying Scream, if you are running Scream in your Void Gauntlet tree, then I recommend picking this up, and probably go for it on the Void Gauntlet as well, as it just makes the healing, the anti-healing effect stronger. The next perk I want to talk about with the Void Gauntlet is Voracious Blade. I think if you are going to be running Blade in your build, then you may as well pick up Voracious Blade as well. This one isn't as necessary, but it just allows you to sort of stay in the fight a little bit longer. If you drop below 50% health, you get 31% lifesteal, which is pretty damn good. If you're standing in Sacred Ground, this increases that healing by another 50%, so just double compounds it. You know, when you're standing in Sacred Ground with Void Blade out, you become very hard to kill. There can be times where the tank goes down, and I'm standing in Sacred Ground with Void Blade, and I just don't go down because I'm just healing so much. So yeah, Voracious Blade, whilst not a must-have perk, if you are going to be running Blade in your build, I do recommend you get this one. Now, the final perk I want to talk about is Nullifying Oblivion. It says, when activated, Oblivion removes limited duration buffs, and it cools down like 10% faster. But it's this first bit that's important, specifically for Garden of Genesis. If you guys are going to go into Garden of Genesis, or the mutated Garden of Genesis, I strongly recommend that you pick up a piece of gear. It does not need to be on the Void Gauntlet, only get it on the armor. But get Nullifying Oblivion, because you can use it on the big soldier guys, the guys with the two-handed mace. You know, they kind of use it like a warhammer and stun everybody. If you use Nullifying Oblivion on those guys, you can very frequently strip away the Fortify buff that they apply to themselves. They increase their armor by a massive amount, but you can remove it because it is a limited duration buff with Nullifying Oblivion. In my opinion, there's not really any other dungeon to use Oblivion for, or Nullifying Oblivion isn't really important in any other dungeon than Garden of Genesis, but in Garden of Genesis, it is a big deal. The other perks that I didn't talk about are Purity of Light, Accelerating Light's Embrace, Diminishing Orb, and Slowing Tether. And the reason why we don't really cover these is because they don't do enough, in my opinion. Now, Purity of Light is an exception. I think if you guys are going to be running Splash of Light in your build, you may as well pick up Purity of Light. You could even go for it on the life staff. It's the effect for Purity of Light. In fact, we'll just find a life staff with it on real quick. There we go, finally found it. So Purity of Light, allies with a debuff removed with Splash of Light are healed for 85% of your weapon damage. Now, it turns out this heal isn't actually very impressive. It sounds like it would be good, but it doesn't really do that much. And honestly, I found that there's not that many times where you can actually remove a debuff with Splash of Light. But if you are going to be using the heal, it has a chance to give you some extra healing, so why not go for it? It's a no-brainer. But the other ones that we talked about, slowing tether, diminishing orb, accelerating Light's Embrace, we're not using tether, and we're not using Light's Embrace in any builds, so those perks just not worth it. And then diminishing orb, it doesn't really do much compared to nullifying Oblivion. It's just a weaker version of it, so I wouldn't prioritize going for those. Right, so that is the ability perks out of the way. Now we're going to move on to our armor perks in general. Now when it comes to PvE, one perk that you're going to need to get is Ward. So we've got Corrupted Ward on every piece of gear here, Corrupted Ward, Corrupted Ward, Corrupted Ward, and then you're going to see this in my different sets here. We have Ancient Ward for when we're doing Ancient Dungeons, so that includes Lazarus, the Ennead, Starstone Barrows, then we've got Lost Ward here as well. So Ward perks, people often ask me, do I need Ward? And I would say you don't need it, but it is like, I really recommend it. Like in the same way that if somebody said, Baggins, I'm going for an expedition into the jungle, I'm going to try and survive in there for 7 days. Do I need a knife and clean drinking water and a flint and tinder? You don't need it, but it would probably increase your chances of survival by a significant margin. And it's the same with ward gear. You don't need it, but my god, it will help you not die. So yeah, get the ward, and then get your relevant ability perks to go with it. If you do have the luxury of getting some legendary gear, the third best perks to go for are Elemental Aversion, although it is limited in the ways you can get this, Refreshing Evasion, or Refreshing. And then you could look to take something like Invigorated, or Vigor, or Freedom. Those would also be acceptable third perks as well. But yeah, Refreshing, or Refreshing Evasion for the cooldown reduction, and where you can get it, Elemental Aversion or Physical Aversion, just give you a little bit of extra tankiness. Moving on to the jewelry perks that I would recommend you go for, you can see we have a similar setup here. So you want to be getting health as a baseline on your amulet all the time. Just having extra health is good. And then I recommend going for a protection perk. The protection perk that you go for depends on the dungeon that you're jumping into, but if you just want a nice one-size-fits-all, I find slash protection or thrust protection does cover you against a lot of different enemies. But eventually, you want to be making your way towards getting these specific protection amulets for the various different types of fights that you're going to go into. So frozen protection, nature protection, fire protection, so on and so forth. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the guide. Ring perks. The most important perks that you want in your ring are Hearty and Sacred. The third best perk would be Refreshing, but this Siphoning perk here is not too bad as well. Again, when it comes to all this gear that you're seeing, we will have a section just a little bit later on in the video talking about where you can go find some of this gear that I'm showing you guys. Moving on to the earring, Evasive and Healthy Toast, or Healthy Toast and Beloved, two perks that I strongly recommend. Evasive or Beloved reduce your threat generation, which is going to just make the, you know, you're going to find a lot of times that you will pull aggro from the tank when you're healing, and you're going to get squished. So the less often you can pull aggro, the better, and Evasive and Beloved help with that. And I really like Healthy Toast because when you drink a potion, a mana potion, you get some healing as well. So mana potions are like also a mini health potion at the same time. Refreshing Toast is also a good candidate here. If I had 3 perks, it would be Refreshing Toast, Healthy Toast, and Evasive or Beloved. Now moving on to the Void Gauntlet, it is going to vary on what perks you want to run depending on whether you're going for the pure healing build, so 300 focus, 200 constitution, or if you're going in for a little bit of DPS. So if you're going for the pure healing build, I would recommend picking up a Void Gauntlet like the one that we showed earlier. So you've got Blessed and you've got Refreshing Rupture. Blessed obviously for extra healing. This does only apply to the Void Gauntlet. Some people ask me if Blessed also works like when your weapon is put away, but no, it's only while the Void Gauntlet is out in your hand, so it only increases the Void Gauntlet healing. And then Refreshing Rupture for the reasons we talked about. And then the third perk would be Keen or Refreshing Move. Honestly, there's a bunch of things you can put there, but Keen's probably a good one because it activates the Refreshing Precision, which is a good perk for the cooldown reduction. Lifestaff perks are basically always going to be the same. You always will have Blessed and Refreshing Move, regardless of what build you're playing. These 2 perks are like mandatory. You have to have Blessed, you have to have Refreshing Move for the extra healing and for the cooldown reduction. And then your third perk can be Mending Protection, Fortifying Sacred Ground, Refreshing Divine Embrace, Purity of Light, just whatever like heal that you really enjoy, you can focus on that one. So we've got Mending Protection here, but if we go for the pure healing build with the 300 focus, 200 con, then we would take Refreshing Divine Embrace. Sometimes we mix it up and we go for the Keen Beacon as well though. And if you just want like a one-size-fits-all that's good everywhere, you could just get Refreshing with like a classic Will of the Ancients. Right, now it's time to talk about some of those items that we showed and where you can get them from. Now, this part of the guide would be pretty extensive, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cheap out on you guys here a little bit, and I'm just going to plug the guide that we have written on our website here. So you'll find a link to this website in the description down below. There's different sections in here. It's basically the same format for the video. This has kind of been a script for me to read this video, but we're just down here. So it is good drops to farm for. And then we have a suggestion and selection of like different weapons that you can go for, which drop from like different dungeons and stuff. So you will be able to click on links or like find images. We'll also have links to New World database for these particular items as well, so you'll be able to find where they drop if there are certain drops available. So when it comes to you finding life staffs, armor, jewelry, check out the guide. Again, links in the description down below. Now let's move on to the next section, which is Heartrunes. So when it comes to Heartrunes, in my opinion, there's like 2 or 3 different ones that you can go for. I'm pretty much taking stone form like almost all the time these days. It's just a nice little safety button. If you get stuck in a stun or a slow or a root, you can pop stone form. It gets you out of it. And then if you can upgrade it to legendary, and 2 people do ask me, how do I upgrade it to legendary? You just got to take the blue version of the Heartrune, so the default version that you get from dungeon bosses. You take it to the stone cutting bench, you can upgrade it to epic, and then you can upgrade the epic to legendary. If you don't see the option to upgrade it, it's probably because you've got it equipped to your character. So make sure you take it off your character, put it into your inventory, and then you'll be able, when you go to the stone cutting table, you'll be able to see the option to upgrade it. So yeah, blue to epic, epic to legendary. If you are going to go for legendary stone form, Stalwart is my favorite recommendation. Some other good Heartrunes that help out your team are the Heartrune of Grasping Vines. So this one, it's the brutal version in particular. It applies rend to all the enemies, so they take 20% more damage, and it also applies weaken to all the enemies, so they do 20% less damage. This is just a really nice support tool. One thing that you do have to bear in mind with the Grasping Vines is if you have Void Blade out in your hand and then you use Grasping Vines, it makes your Void Blade disappear. So this can be a little bit frustrating because technically you put away the weapon, do the vines, and then you pull back out your weapon, which causes, again, the Void Blade to disappear. One of the Heartrune that can be pretty useful for support aspects is the Bile Bomb rune. If you are going to be going into a dungeon or a mutation where the enemy's doing a lot of healing, Bile Bomb can be pretty useful because it reduces the enemy's healing by 30%. And then you can also pick up this Mending Bile version here, where it reduces the healing, but it also applies like the Essence Rupture effect, basically. So it says players who hit the afflicted target are healed for 20% of the damage they deal. So yeah, very similar to Essence Rupture, basically. Now in this next part of the video, we are going to talk about gems. Now gems are a bit of a vast topic because, you know, when we get into mutations and the higher level mutations you get, you are going to have to start switching out your gems pretty often depending on what sort of fight you're going into. Now as a general rule, I would say a one-size-fits-all gem would probably be the Cut Pristine Diamond or the Cut Pristine Malachite. I do use this in a few pieces of gear still. You can see on my PvP gear, I've got some diamonds in here. Malachite is kind of like the flip side of that, whereas diamond gives you physical and elemental. The Malachite gives you primarily elemental and a little bit of physical, which just covers everything. I think for, again, baseline healing, the majority of damage you're going to take is physical if you pull aggro from mobs, but every now and again there's a little bit of elemental weaved in there. So general rule of thumb for just if you want a one-size-fits-all, diamond or Malachite, or you could even look to go for Onyx and Opal for physical and elemental respectively. However, if you guys are interested in jumping into dungeons and healing mutations, then you are going to need to start doing a setup like this, where you take a full set of gems. So we've got Amber for nature damage absorption, nature damage absorption, nature damage absorption, and pretty much all of our gear here. And that is if we want to jump in and do a mutated version of the depths. You can see that it is a nature mutation in here, so enemies deal 50% of all damage as nature. So yeah, we're taking that to specifically reduce the incoming damage from those mobs. And then likewise, if I was going to jump into Dynasty Shipyard, we have a different mutation here. It's Icebound, so then we need a full set of ice gems instead. So this is where the gear set storage system comes in really handy. And I've gone to the lengths to have 2 different sets of gear for Corrupted, one with ice, one with nature. It is pretty extensive, and you would say, like, Baggins, do I really need to do that? Yes, in my opinion, honestly. You're gonna like take a lot of damage these days. Everybody's quite squishy. It just makes it easier. You're gonna find that the dungeons are easier to run. If you do want to be a little bit cheaper, you could take like 3 opal gems and then only have like 2 or 3 gems here. So some of them are opal and then the other ones are ice or nature. Because opal does cover everything. It's like elemental damage absorption, so that's fire, frost, nature, void, everything is covered there, but it's not as strong as the 6%. That's 6%, this is only 2.5. So yeah, you can go for some opals if you want to, so you don't need to switch your gems all the time. But honestly, if you want to have an easy time, especially these days with the mutations getting harder because the Fortify changes, I would recommend that you go for a full set of amber gems for nature. It's ruby gems for fire, amethyst gems for void, aquamarine gems for ice, and then you also have amethyst gems for void. I think I might have repeated myself there at some point, but yeah, we'll probably try and include this on a guide somewhere on the resources.BagginsTV website as well, so check out the link in the description down below for that one. Now, the last thing to talk about before we go into general tips is Runeglass Gems. Now, in my opinion, I would not go for Runeglass Gems. If you guys don't even know what Runeglass Gems are, they are like an end game thing that you can go for. You can craft them via weaponsmithing, if I'm not mistaken. So you make these Runeglass cases at a forge. You can also buy them off the trading post, and then you take them to the stone cutting table with a cut pristine gem, and you sort of encase the gem inside of, well, the case. Now, when it comes to your armor, I would not recommend these, again, because the nature of needing to switch out gems in your armor depending on the mutation, I just think it's a bit overkill. And even putting them in your weapons, it's not really that much extra. There's no Runeglass gems that increase your healing, so you only put a Runeglass gem in your weapons if you want to do a little bit of extra damage. So I've gone for a Runeglass gem on my life staff here. I use the one that gives me a little bit of extra nature damage. So it says deal 8% nature damage per second for 2 seconds. One thing that you guys might be a little bit confused about is if we compare the two here, so this says 15% damage and outgoing healing while at full health, and this says 12% damage and outgoing healing while at full health. So you're like, Baggins, you're losing healing. Is that really worth it? For whatever reason, it's just like, I don't know, Amazon, New World, spaghetti code. The healing isn't actually being reduced. We've tested this several times. Hopefully we can put up a clip on the screen here, but the healing isn't actually reduced. So you do just get some extra damage at no cost for your healing. So yeah, if you do want to go for a Runeglass gem in your life staff, you can, but honestly, just a good old-fashioned diamond is probably the best way to go. And on that note, I realized we only talked about gems in our armor. We didn't talk about gems in the weapons. When it comes to gems in the weapons, diamond in the life staff as a baseline. And when it comes to the Void Gauntlet, if you are going to be going in for some extra damage, then you want to be looking to take these sort of elemental conversion gems here. So this is my Void Gauntlet that I use for extra damage to the Corrupted. So we've got Corrupted Bane and Refreshing Move here. And then we have a similar one over here, which is Ancient Bane and Refreshing Move. I really like the Refreshing Move in conjunction with the Void Blade, because when we go in and the enemies, we can get a lot of cooldown reduction, which means we can pop down more Oblivions, more Orbs, more Screams. The Bane obviously allows us to do extra damage, but the gem there is to capitalize on the fact that enemies are weak to certain damage types. So the Ancient are extra weak to Lightning, the Corrupted are extra weak to Arcane, the Angry Earth are extra weak to Fire, and so on and so forth. So I'll put a link in the description down below, which like includes all the different mob weaknesses. But yeah, if you want to do damage with the Void Gauntlet, if you're gonna go with the Void Blade, then make sure you run a damage conversion gem just to fully maximize on the mob's weakness. So yeah, Ruby Gem for Fire, Topaz Gem for Lightning. Again, we'll try and include a link in the description down below to better explain this resource. But effectively, if you're going to be using Void Blade, you want to get Bane, you want to get Refreshing Move, and you want this sort of gem here, which capitalizes on the mob's weakness. Right, now the last thing that we're going to talk about in the video is some general healing tips and tricks. Now, a bunch of people ask me about my keybinds, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys these, and it's also going to be a recommendation of something that you do. So target group member 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I recommend that you set up keybinds for group members 2, 3, 4, and 5. I really strongly recommend that you do this. I know it might take a little bit of getting used to. Some of you guys have been using the scroll wheel to sort of select your party member like this, but the sooner that you can move away from this and just press a button to sort of reliably heal the person that you want it, the faster, the better that you will become as a healer. So set up your keybinds. One thing that I also recommend that you go along with this is don't target group member 1, because that is you and you already have a keybind for targeting yourself. It's control by default, so if you press the ability and then you press control, you will drop a heal on yourself like so, which is what we did just earlier. Obviously with beacon, you can just aim that one. With orb, you just aim it as well. You can't select a party member. With flash of light, you don't need to do that one. So if you are running this build, there's only one heal that you need to target, but I do still recommend that you do those targeted keybinds. One thing that I find useful and I would recommend to you guys is picking up an MMO mouse. So if you don't already have one, you can Google search, eBay, Amazon, whatever, I don't know, wherever you buy mouses from. You can get an MMO mouse, which is typically a mouse with quite a few buttons on the side of it. So there's the Corsair Scimitar, the Razer Naga, there's a few other ones as well, Logitech something G3. People in the comments can make some recommendations. I'm personally using a Steel Series mouse myself, which isn't actually really an MMO mouse, but it does have a few buttons on the side of it, which I use to keybind to select party members. I just find it makes it easier. You can sort of set it and forget it, and once you build the muscle memory, again, it makes you a much stronger healer. One of the quick tips that I can give you guys is before you place down any heals, always try to at least do one dodge. So if you dodge, you will get the Bend Light passive active. If you are going to be running this, and I strongly recommend that you do, after a dodge, your heals are 20% more effective for 5 seconds. So whenever you're about to place down a heal, dodge first and then put down the heal. If you have the luxury, if you do have a little bit of time, you can also dodge and then do a heavy attack that will give you the Intensify effect, which increases your healing by 10%. And this does stack up to 3 times. So you could go all out and then put the heals down. But usually I just try and go for a dodge, then I do a heavy attack, and then I do like a Sacred Ground or Beacon or whatever. So a dodge and a heavy increases your healing by 30%, which is, you know, that's 30% extra healing. That's like the difference of being in a light equip load versus medium. Another tip I would recommend is if you get aggro of mobs, and we don't have like a perfect demonstration here because we don't really have any mobs, but if you do have like the mobs are coming towards you, don't panic. I know it's like the first thing you do, usually I see like beginner healers get aggro and they just run away and they run away and they run away and they run away because like, oh my god, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. What you want to actually do is try and go towards the enemies, towards your tank. So let's say Jihabuki, god, I'm sorry, I'm saying his name wrong. Let's go towards him here. The mobs are aggroed on us to this tree, so we're going to dodge past them and just try and keep kiting them through the tank, because this is going to make it so much easier for your tank. Rather than have your tank sort of chase you around and you're running around like a headless chicken and the Benny Hill theme tune music is playing, just be calm and control, and you got to dodge through. Apparently we needed for some healing here, but I've got to explain first. Dodge through your tank, and then they can drop the shockwave or something and get aggro of the mobs. Another trick I can show you guys when it comes to mob management is ranged mobs. So you will find very frequently that you get archers and musketeers, you know, enemies that do ranged attacks are going to be hitting you because the tank can't really get aggro of them too well. Now, ideally, if your tank is a good tank, they will get aggro of the melee mobs and then they'll bring them over to the ranged mobs and clump them all together. But we'll talk about that in a tanking guide at a future point. You're going to find that some tanks are lazy, some DPS are lazy, and they'll just let you deal with the ranged mobs. So one thing that you can do is, let's say our team is all fighting on this corner here and they've got all the melee mobs, but there's one guy with a bow over there and he is hitting you really hard. What you can try and do is just sort of hide around the corner here. So put your heals down like so. Make sure you get your heals down. Make sure you're doing your stuff. And the archer, because it can't get to you, because it has it can't see you, he will run up closer to try and come around this corner to shoot at you, and that brings the mob in. So you can use objects to sort of line of sight, hide yourself from the enemies, and then it means that they will have to come closer to get around the corner, and then that's your cue for the tank and DPS to hopefully step in and actually try and help you out. If you are using the beginner healing build with the Oblivion Essence Rupture and Orb, remember that you're just using the Void Gauntlet for its abilities, and then you're switching back to the Life Staff as soon as possible. You do not want to spend any time attacking with a Void Gauntlet like this. It's just a waste of time in my opinion. You'll often find yourself actually doing more damage with the Life Staff because it scales better with focus for its damage. The Void Gauntlet is only really worth going and doing left clicks if you are going to be using the Void Blade. So if not using the Void Blade, make sure you're just using your abilities and then you're switching over straight away to the Life Staff. One other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the Life Staff is make sure as often as you can that you're just doing left clicks. So if you have the luxury, if your abilities are on cooldown and there's not much else to do, just be left clicking, because as your left clicks pass through your allies, you will activate Blissful Touch, which is actually a pretty decent heal, and you can activate it on multiple different enemies or allies. And then also, if it hits the enemy on the other side, you then get the proc of Revitalize, which reduces your life staff cooldowns by 5%, and you've also got Refreshing Move, which again reduces your life staff cooldowns by another 3%. So you're getting a lot of cooldown reduction with every click, and you're also getting a lot of healing on your teammates. So don't forget the importance of left clicking. It's actually pretty damn good with the life staff, and it's going to make up a considerable part of your gameplay as a healer is just doing this. So don't forget the importance of the good old-fashioned left click. Right, that is going to do it for this guide here, guys. If you enjoyed this one, as always, make sure you go ahead and click the like button. I tried to be as in-depth as I can here, but undoubtedly we've still missed something, even though this video is God knows how long. If you do want a full breakdown, the text breakdown of this video to read at your own leisure, again, we'll have links to that in the description down below. It's resources.BagginsTV.com. We've got the healing guide in there. We're going to have mage guides soon, tanking guides, DPS guides, and a bunch of other resources that I think will be useful for you guys when it comes to playing New World. So yeah, check out the website, subscribe if you want to see more guides like this, and thank you as always for watching. I'll see you guys all in the next one.